This one came up a lot in the comments in regard to the UK state pension being one of the worst in Europe, and I really wanted to just highlight the piece of research that this all stems from, and that, to be fair, there is some truth to it. Also, towards the end of this video, just a look at the National Insurance Fund account showing the NI contributions in and the expenses out. It makes for some interesting reading. So first of all, this all came about because of a report by the OECD, Pensions at a Glance, which runs to around 47 pages. You don't want to see the detailed version. This was also then picked up by the FT, going one step further to say that the UK state pension is the worst in the developed world. It all stems from this rather dull looking chart, which in very simple terms shows the percentage of an average salary that is replaced at retirement. 100% would mean someone retiring would receive 100% of the average salary from retirement. Let's say the average is £35,000, then 100% replacement in retirement would be the full £35,000. If it was 50%, then it would be approximately £17,000. So let's take a little look at this chart and see where the UK sits based on the net replacement for a full career average worker. Well, it's not great. Let's start from the 100% replacement, which is over on the right hand side, and we'll work our way along. So we have Turkey, Italy, Luxembourg and Austria all comfortably on the right. In the mid-table we have Finland, Israel, Sweden. We keep going and going all the way along towards the left, and boom, there we are, the UK. The UK at the furthest point on the graph with just under a 30% replacement value, which broadly sounds accurate if we consider that the UK state pension is currently just under £10,000, then the assumed average salary would be approximately £30,000. Admittedly, this is only part of the story, but clearly on this basis alone, it's a stark contrast and a clear indication that the UK state pension is an insufficient replacement of individual salary, and fairly shocking when viewed in this manner versus those other countries. Just to be clear, the other indication here is the voluntary element, which tops up the income to just over 60%. For most in the UK, outside a defined benefit pension scheme, their retirement savings will be made up of the state pension, which to some degree is mandatory, although reliant on a minimum of 10 qualifying years, and of a personal pension, which is either set up by the individual or more likely now via a workplace pension and auto-enrolment. We can see with the UK the combination of the UK state pension, the sort of mandatory element, and the personal pension. This gets the average person in a best case scenario, bear in mind this is the best case scenario, to 60% replacement of their career average, which is still lower than the OECD average. And the UK isn't the only country making amendments to the mandatory pensions. Over half of the countries in the OECD report had increased pension ages, albeit very reluctantly due to it being such a contentious area. And we do have a number of viewers that live outside of the UK, so it would be interesting if they could comment on their experience and depending on where they are as to the quality of the arrangements in place in their country. And it's kind of interesting to consider here what the UK government had as an option when reviewing incomes in retirement, and they must have weighed up the possibility of either increasing the UK state pension in terms of its value and pushing the cost onto individuals via national insurance contributions, or pushing the onus and responsibility onto individuals and to some extent their employers. Obviously they chose the latter, and the current workplace pension saving and auto-enrolment regime was born to fill that replacement income gap that the state pension doesn't fill. And I wanted to show you this as well, is that if we compare this to the Mercer report 2021, we can see that the UK comes in around the middle of the table, and this result is largely supported by what they term as the integrity of the UK pension scheme, which might well raise a few eyebrows. Integrity being such things as governance and security of assets, which, yeah, seems reasonable, but also due to the impact that auto-enrolment is having on individual saving into their pensions, that the combination of both the UK state pension and the personal pension gives a more reasonable outlook. However, as pretty much both reports highlight, those on low incomes and the self-employed are particularly at risk of having an insufficient income in retirement and ultimately falling through the gaps. Mercer offer the following recommendations of increasing the minimum state pension for low-income pensioners and increasing the coverage for the self-employed. Both really very decent suggestions, which leads up to a really important and key point to all of this: the importance of the individual taking responsibility for their own savings, the need to take it seriously and to invest in an appropriate way. It's incredible to think what a fundamental shift we had from the risk and responsibility being borne in combination by the state and by the company in the form of a final salary pension scheme or career average scheme, to a system of the state and the individual. Someone on a final salary pension had a reasonable idea of what they would get as a replacement income. A final salary pension did exactly that, a percentage of the individual salary. Well, now when staring at a pot of money, whether it's 100,000 or 500,000, it's far harder to distinguish what that means as an income, how to invest it, how long it will last. And that really isn't anyone else's problem other than the retirees. It's a huge change in responsibility, and one that a lot of people don't even realize they have until retirement is slap bang in front of them, much like a bug to a windscreen. And we do have to be careful with this comparison with other countries, as I absolutely appreciate that pension, whether set up by the individual or by the state, has to be sustainable. And we have to know that the UK state pension works on a pay-as-you-go basis, which, if anyone doesn't know, means that there isn't any physical pot of money, no large fund into which all the NI contributions go and where your money is set aside until you hit state pension age. No, it works on the basis that the current generation of retirees are having their state pension paid by those that are currently paying NI, just as they paid the NI of the generation before them. Now, before anyone starts yelling Ponzi at me and slamming that in the comments, yes, there is definitely the hint of a pyramid scheme about this, the reliance of one group funding the next on a never-ending conveyor belt. But there is no investment element to this, and ultimately it's not really a Ponzi unless there is some deception or fraud going on. There's clearly a built-in risk to the fundamental shape of this arrangement, the continued need for a balance of payments into the system that are either greater or the same as the payments out, e.g. a working population greater than the population of retirees. And we know from looking at the National Insurance Fund account that clearly you don't put in 100% and get 100% out the other side. It's not one for one, as there are other costs, administration, for example. And interestingly, fraud is also captured in these accounts. And the current practice of the system, the NFIF, or National Insurance Fund, basically where all the NI contributions go, is that there should be a minimum working balance of 1/6 or 16.7% of the projected annual expenditure. If this level is under threat, then in some cases a Treasury grant can be used to bridge that gap, basically a loan from the government. The working balance for 2019-20 was £17.5 billion, this being 16.7% of total projected expenditure. However, the actual balance of 2019-20 was approximately £37 billion. No Treasury grant was required, and the balance gets carried over to next year. So, in summary, around £110 billion came in and £104 billion went on benefit payments, and the difference gets added to the balance, which I believe is the £30 billion that John Prescott wanted to tap up to help fund the NHS. But clearly the risk is that you deplete the working balance and end up in a position of having to borrow to fill that gap. From a demographic position, we can see that if the working population fell significantly, either through mass unemployment or declining population numbers against an aging population, then clearly this system would break or require significant readjustment. This could be in the form of a lower state pension, higher contribution rate, increased pension ages, or increased government borrowing. On the flip side, it also means that this is unlikely to disappear completely, that unless we did see some huge demographic shifts, then politically scrapping or putting in some means test for the state pension would be political suicide. But clearly, as the UK stands, is the state pension likely to increase or compete with other countries? No, not likely. But the UK isn't the only country having to move its retirement age or review how pensions are paid for. There is a general shift towards a greater reliance on private pension funding and on retirement ages linked to average life expectancies. There does have to be a high degree of care when it comes to pension systems that are in place to attempt to make them as sustainable as possible to weather economic shocks or aging populations. In truth, I haven't really given enough thought to what kind of system would you put into place that could be any more sustainable. Would a sovereign wealth fund work? Is that too much risk? Would a purely mandatory system work with no personal pension element involved? It's a tough call to make, and the implications for retirees are absolutely huge. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.